Welcome to Digital Communication, a look at communicating better online and trying to align the communication better with the online world that you're already doing in the real world. My name is Dante St. James. Let's get underway. A quote here from George Bernard Shaw, an Irish playwright, poet, activist, and critic. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's actually taken place. Big mistake. We often think we're communicating, but what we really might be doing is broadcasting, or what we might be thinking we're communicating. What we're really doing is just sitting there, just hammering out words that nobody can really understand what we're doing. So we're going to hopefully address some issues just like that as we explore this world of communicating that works in both directions, especially online. This is brought to you by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program from the Australian Government. We'll also be recording this on YouTube, so it'll be available on the Business Station YouTube channel directly, probably about the next hour after this particular webinar takes place. If you're watching on YouTube, I encourage you to put your comments down below, or even to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, because you'll be seeing new stuff coming out almost every day. There's tons of content that's really going to help you to grow your business, particularly in the digital sphere. First of all, what we're going to look at, we're going to look at the difference between communication in person and online. You'll have to excuse me, I've got a very, very croaky throat today. So I'll be taking sips of my honey and lemon and ginger tea quite frequently. So my apologies for that. The voice is a little bit weak today. We're looking at strategies for communication better online, which is naturally what we're here for. We're going to look at what some of the danger words and what the magic words and some of those combinations and how they work together to get a good result or a bad result. And we'll look at one that's really important, I think, which is about cooling your jets when things get a little bit like they feel like they're, offensive or look like they're attacking you, how you can cool your jets down as the receiver of the message. And also, and amongst that, responsibilities for the sender of the email or the communication or the message, as well as the responsibilities you have as the receiver of those things as well. Let's keep going. First of all, a little bit about me. My own businesses include Clickstarter, a digital marketing agency, then DanteStJames.com, which is my upcoming training business, and then Cellular One, my reseller of mobile and NBN products. I've studied with University of New South Wales, the University of Western Sydney, Chartered Institute of Marketing and TAFE New South Wales for a bunch of micro-credentials. I've also been certified across LinkedIn, Facebook's family of apps, or Meta as it's now known, with NBN Business as an advisor, the Be Connected Network for the Australian Government, Google's Digital Springboard Partnership, the Entrepreneurship Facilitators Program in the Northern Territory, and many, many more. I won't go on too much about me because this is about communication, not about glorification of what I've done and where I've been. So let's keep going. So there's a bit of a problem when it comes with online communication. And that main problem probably comes about that we just don't have all the information we normally had if we're in person. When we're in person doing some kind of communication, we get that in life and as humans and as societal and social creatures, that there's going to be misunderstanding, there's going to be disagreement, and there's going to be conflict. That's part of human life. That's who we are. If we want to be able to achieve things as an intelligent species, these things will come up frequently. But when we're in person and we're in a social situation and these things come up, we have lots of tools at our disposal that help us to turn all that into this: misunderstanding into understanding, disagreement into agreement, and conflict into conflict resolution. Because we've got these social tools to deal with, and evolutionarily we've been able to build up these habits and these ways of being able to work with each other, we've got all those things. But in the online world, we don't necessarily have those things. When we're communicating in person, we've got the power of the verbal. So we call that the spoken word, understanding what someone's saying. And then there's the physical, that could be called body language, for instance. And then there's a third one I've added in here, which is not that commonly talked about when it comes to communication. And that's intuition, or the intuitive approach to communication and understanding what people are saying and how to work with what people are saying. So let's look at the verbal. That sort of makes it makes a lot of sense, because if we're talking or if we're communicating with someone in person, there's volume. So the louder that I talk, the louder the more aggressive things become, or perhaps the more exciting. Then there's the tone of how you'll speak. So if you're speaking in a tone, so even just by maybe smiling while I speak, so I'll go, and the tone of how I speak, it lifts the expression that I'm having, because I'm able to physically manifest an output to my voice. And then there's the context. Quite often conversations that happen in person have a context of the here and now, which means that often it's about a conflict that may have just occurred that you're speaking directly of right now and having a conversation with someone about that. Or if it's something as simple as a conversation you're having in a shop with someone who's an assistant in that shop. So the context is within that shop. The context is within that moment and that product that you're holding and the credit card you're about to hand over to pay for it. There's context that adds a lot more into it, so that we're not just going by the tone of voice, not just going by the volume of voice, but we're also going by where we are, where we're at physically at the time of that conversation. Now, the physical, or what we like to call body language, is often about our stance. If your stance is very like, ooh, shoulders up, leaning forward and getting ready for the attack, then the words that you are saying are within that context. There's also the gestures we use. I've got a little bit of Mediterranean in me at some point of my ancestry, and so I tend to use a lot of gestures. A lot of hands are going like this. I tend to gesticulate quite a lot. I try to control that in a Zoom call because sometimes it doesn't work so great. But what we do is that when we add gestures in, it adds further context for which we can figure out what someone's saying and the mood in which they're saying it. So a smile on the face, a stance that's relaxed, and hands just casually just sort of used like this and gestures makes you feel non-aggressive. And it also brings across a message that's much more easy to hear because you don't feel like you're being forced to hear it. So all that body language, from sitting back with legs crossed to sitting forward and leaning with a head at an angle, all those things will create a very different manner with which people will read what you're saying, and by which you read what they're saying as well. These are all very physical things, but then the intuition side comes in. And that's where we take those verbal signals and we take those physical symbols, and often we take forward some background information we might have about that person. If they're someone who is quite loud verbally and can feel, if you were to hear that across a room without seeing them, you'd think that was quite aggressive. If they've got physical signals which are always reaching in, leaning in and being very close to you, that might feel a little bit intrusive. But if you know the background information of this is just how that person is, and it doesn't mean anything beyond just what they're actually saying, then your intuition will tell you this is a safe situation and I feel fine, I feel comfortable. He's getting a little close, but you know, as long as he's keeping the 1.5 meter social physical distancing, I'm kind of okay with that. At the same time, if someone was sitting back and they were sort of sitting right back in their chair and seeming a little bit uninterested, so their physical signals are a little bit off, but their verbal signals are they're actually, you know, having a great conversation and explaining things in great detail. And you know from their background information that person's a university professor who's a professor in physics. Then you can go, well, actually, I need to hear what the voice is saying, because the physical signals are just the way he seems back, and he doesn't really, he doesn't get in tight with conversations because he's a very laid back person and a little bit aloof from students. And because you have that background information, you're able to form a more intuitive feeling about what the motives of that person are, and also what the outcome is they're seeking to get from that conversation. So when we're in physical land, we've got all of this at our disposal. All of our evolution, everything we've been created to be, comes into being, that we can interpret things much more holistically than what we can when we're just reading something from an email. So of course, when we're having conversations in person, really only 7% of what we're receiving as the person in the conversation is about the actual content of what is said. 38% of what is expressed by what we call the paraverbal, the how we set the tone, the way that someone tells a story, the emphasis they use on different words, and sometimes then the pauses they may take that for dramatic effect, something like that. So we're still only got, you know, about 45% all up of all of the verbal communication that's put across. The rest of it's in body language. It's what you look like when you said it. So if you're frowning deeply and putting on an angry face and saying the sky is blue, the grass is green, you're looking quite aggressive, even though those words are quite neutral, you come across as aggressive. So 55% of that communication comes across in the way that you express yourself. I smile a lot because I smile a lot in real life. I'm not a very dour or frowning person. But then if you are someone who is quite frowny, then understand that that comes across as part of your non-verbal communication. And no one's asking you to be someone who you're not or to fake it, but just remember that the way that you express yourself can often be the majority of what people are receiving as that message. Yes, there were words said. Yes, there was a certain tone and a sort of way that you might be able to talk, but ultimately we're looking at that non-verbal. So if that non-verbal stuff, which all comes down to what we can see and the context of where we are, how does that work for online? Because we don't have a lot of that. If 55% of the information that we usually receive for communication is not there, we've got like a lot less to work with to figure out what the heck someone's saying or how they're trying to communicate with us. Good communication in the real world means all those things are aligned, but the problem is online, they're not aligned. They're not really set up in such a way, which is, they just don't make it. Technology doesn't really allow us to do this. To a degree, some of it does. On this Zoom call, you can see the little video of me up in the corner, and you can see that I'm expressing myself in a certain way, smiling along the way, and using expressions and gestures that sort of help to introduce who I am, to help to present this particular thing. But if you didn't have that, like so many times on an email or something, where you don't have that position of the hand, the head position to be able to refer to, what we call the speak to listen ratio, how often someone speaks as opposed to how often they listen for responses, proximity, how close they are to you, whether they're wearing a smile, whether there's a gesture of hands, that's posture that's upright or a little bit slouchy. I tend to be a bit of a sloucher. I've got to watch that sometimes. And also the context of what you're in and the time that is happening as well. If you don't have all these things, how then do you manage to be able to work with what's online? Because when you're online, all you've essentially got to work with is what you see on screen, the mental state you're in at the time. So whether you're tired, whether you're upset, whether you're manically happy, whether you're in a pretty good but neutral mood, those things come into play. And then there's the power of assumption. So the history of all the other conversations you've had with people over email, over text message, over Facebook comments, all those things come to play. And they try to make up that 55% of information that we don't have when we're having a conversation. So that's really scary. Some of it's got to do with emotions. Some of it's got to do with assumptions. Whoa, that's a lot to be squeezing into 55%. You'd want to make sure you get it right. When it comes to the phone, for instance, and research tells us that what you say, so the words you're saying, make up for about 13% of what people take away from that conversation. How you said it makes up 87%. What you said is you said it. What you looked like is you said it. We don't have that information. So what tends to happen is that when we don't have the context, when we don't have the in-person, the body language, the non-verbal cues, then what we need to do is just start to fill the dials with the other stuff, with what you said and how you said it. So what you said becomes more important than if we were in person, because you have to listen a little harder and take a bit of an effort there. But how you say it, that then becomes a whole different deal. That becomes quite a dominant part of how the communication is received. Likewise, when it comes to body language, that can play a role in your voice. So if I'm on this call, for instance, and I've slouched over like this and just leaning close, and you see my tired eyes from not getting enough sleep last night, and the tone of my voice has just gone down because I've just leant forward and I've got no use of my diaphragm. Or if I sit back and smile, and then I can not be quite so monotonous. I can be a little bit more expressive in my communication. You can see how that body language makes a very, very big difference. So that's a bit of a cue, I guess. But when you're on something like Zoom calls or team calls, that sitting upright, allowing yourself to fully express your diaphragm, which is a muscular sort of structure that sits just sort of on the top of your, below your chest and above your stomach, that will help you to express better. And it helps you to breathe better. I've got a problem with that. When I slouch over, I start yawning because I'm not breathing enough. So what I need to do is always force myself to sit upwards, and it makes for a better video. It makes for a better podcast, anything audio I need to do. So you can do that as well, just by that kind of thing. Now, this is just on Zoom calls. When it comes to emails, you don't have any of this stuff to work with. All you've got is what was said. There's no how you said it. There's no what you looked like as you said it, because there's no verbal communication. There's just quite simply what the words and the sentences that are on the page. So 100% of the information someone has to work with when they are communicating with you on email is on that page or in that screen full of text. That puts a lot of responsibility then on the way you communicated things in that email. So for example, You can add different sort of expressions to email by exclamation points, question marks, punctuation, breaking your text up into blocks, perhaps using things like dot points to list some points in there, and emphasis by underlining or italics with things. Or sometimes for people trying to get really shouty, they can use all capital letters, which I do not recommend you do because it is very, very aggressive and quite universally so. It's something which you don't want to be doing too much because people will assume that you are yelling. So there's lots of different ways you can sort of make that a little bit more easy for people to take in, is just by simply making sure you use some sort of emphasis, which is why punctuation is so important. I'm not a big English writing Nazi or anything like that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you must use the right your, or there and there, or through, thorough, and though. You know, those kind of mixed up horrible things that we do in the English language, and we have a terrible language for that. It's something which is going to be much more softened when you learn the power of emphasis, when you learn the power of structure of when you're writing things out to make it easier for people to receive, but also the ability for you to add tone. So just like when we're having a conversation in person, I'll have a certain tone to which I'm giving, which is whether I'm entertaining or whether I'm informing you of something or educating you about something, my tone will change. So too, your tone can change with different use of punctuation and emphasis in things like emails, particularly where there's quite a lot that can often be said. So how do we then work around the limitations? What are the things we can do that help us to be better communicators online? But since if we don't have that 55% of body language and non-verbal communication to work from, what do we have? Well, we can work around them by asking ourselves, first of all, how important is this piece of communication? And if you do have any questions, by the way, on the live call, please pop them into the Q&A or the chat, because this is live on Zoom. If you're on YouTube watching this after the live call, pop a comment down in the comments below and we'll be able to answer those for you. That stuff will be referred back to me by the people in the office who look after our YouTube stuff. Now, how important is this communication? Is it something that you would go, this is absolutely urgent, it must be communicated in a certain way? Or is it a bit more casual, a bit more like a text message? I put it down to a traffic light system. So in the traffic light system, we look at things that are critical or important or casual. So in the red, they're critical. There's a certain kind of communication that should occur when it's critical. When it's important, there's also some things you should do which are very good, but casual is a bit more, you can use kind of almost any kind of communication style that you like. So when we look at them closer in the critical, you can see that ultimately critical communication is best done in person. It's best done face-to-face with someone, so that that full 100% of ways that you express that information are received from someone. Not just the 7%, which is just written down on an email, not just the way you express yourself as well, but also the fact that your body language is involved, a smile, a frown, a less aggressive stance, a very passive stance, or something which helps people to feel safe. Now that's better done in person, but in this modern age, because we've got Omicron just floating all around us, in person is not probably as practical as what it used to be. And especially, I guess, when it comes to this world that we're working with, things aren't necessarily as easy to work with as you would think. So for instance, we have become very, very used to dealing with Zoom and Teams, very, very used to doing Google Meet calls, video calls. So if there's something critical that has to be communicated, rather than defaulting to email or to an instant message or an SMS or something like that, we can then go, well, what's the second best thing to an in-person meeting? It's a video call, a Zoom call, or a Teams call. So when you do that, you add in some more of those things that we find so valuable as communicators and human beings. The first one being that we've got the tone that can be expressed. So there's a lot more tone rather than just a disembodied voice or just text on a page. We've now got a voice. We've now got the expression, the tone that we're using to communicate with. And most importantly, we've got body language. Now, you can't see below my nipples pretty much. That's about as high as you're going to get, as low as you're going to get on a Zoom call, unless I choose to stand up and move around. But what you do have is the way that I hold my head, the way that I nod, the way that I'll respond with active listening as letting you know that I'm listening to you. And also things like gestures, where I'll just go, thank you so much when I'm thanking someone, as to express, not just through my voice, but through my actions, that I'm grateful for someone. Or if I'm looking at going, thinking out loud, I'll scratch my head and go, that's common thinking thing. So you're far more easily able to interpret what's going on. So you'll notice there that I have not got phone calls or emails or SMS or Facebook Messenger messages in there for critical communication. That's because when it's absolutely critical and there's a ton of information in there, it's absolutely necessary, or it's disciplinary, or it's something which has to be maybe a conflict. These things are better done in person, or at least over a video call. Now, I'm not a very confrontational person. I avoid conflict and drama like crazy. But at times, sometimes you have to go and do it. You have to put in your big girl pants and you have to just go, yep, you know what? I'm now the one who has to stand up and take control of this situation. It takes practice. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy every time you do it. It's certainly not for me. But what we need to do is get as in person as possible for that critical stuff. And then what I've got on the symbol and then the email there is back it up with an email. So that's the important thing. A lot of people resort to email because they want the tracking. They want the tracking of everything that was said. They want to be able to say, oh, this is what was said and what was not said. So having an email lets you deliver the news in the best possible way to the person who deserves your best communication. They do. Then you back it up with an email, which then repeats the points you discussed in person. Now, if that in-person conversation or video call gets a little heated, you can refer to that in the email, but just by saying, I know that things got a little heated in that conversation, so I just wanted to clarify what we were discussing and how we were discussing it. Now we move to important communication. So this is something which is not absolutely critical. It's not someone's job on the line. It's not, disaster or survival, anything like that. This is just important information they may need to know. This is where we go into the realm of the video call, like I've just been talking about, or a phone or audio call. So you're actually able to have a direct communication with them. Now, again, this is best done as close to in person as possible. Where a video call is more than adequate, as is a phone call, because you're able to express things in a certain way. You're able to use body language in a video call. You're able to use vocal tone when it comes to the phone call. Now, not all of us are great at this. Some people, this is English as a second language, so it may be actually a lot more difficult to do tone, and I get that. So what we do when you're someone who struggles with that a little bit, we say back it up with an email as well, just so it's clear to both parties, so to you and to them and to whoever else needs to read that information, that there is an email backup as well. So you're taking the time to make sure that they have the best possible chance to understand the communication. Then we send the email. We don't send the email first, because that'll just let them have a whole lot of assumptions first up that they'll bring into the call, and they'll already have their shackles up and they're ready to attack you. We don't want that. What we want is the opportunity to express to people a calm front, so that then when they get the email, they read it from that perspective of not a shock or a surprise, but going, oh yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. And they can continue on with their day and be productive. That's what we want. Or if they're a customer, they can be really responsive in a good way. Particularly at the moment, we've got lots of logistics problems in the world of getting things and products around to us. We might wait longer times for things to get to us. I'm in the Northern Territory, so the roads up from Adelaide, which a lot of our products and services come from, are now blocked off, and so is the rail line. So we've got situations where product shortages are becoming a little bit more critical. So we're now sort of looking at trying to get stuff in through Queensland instead of through South Australia. So there's always something that's going to come up that's going to make life a little bit harder to get things. Now we move to the casual. This is where it's not vital information. It's not going to change their lives. It's just things like, oh, we've just changed the time of our Zoom call from 3 to 4, or tomorrow the theme is wear white all day, and we've just changed that to wear black all day, or something like that. Just nothing that's super important. It's not going to kill anybody. It's not going to cause a major issue for someone's day. So that's the one where we go. Now we go to email. Now we go to instant message and SMS. This is where we can be a lot more casual, a lot more, a lot lighter, and the tone doesn't have to be as strong, because the information is not of a critical or an important nature. It's just of a little bit of information to add to something you already know about. So there's already context in there. We don't have to go to a great deal of trouble of individually going and seeing every person that we work with, every supplier that we have, and every customer we've ever met. and having a chat to them, when we can very easily just shoot out a quick email saying, hey, I know you've ordered these. We've got a few problems with logistics right now, getting our materials in from the East Coast. Please let me know if you've not received yours, and I'll keep an eye out for the tracking details for you. So something like that is just nice and casual, lets them know that it's coming, also gives them some information. I've got a great formula for you right now too for doing exactly that. And we call this KUBA, K-U-B-A, and this makes your online communication, especially online communication, much more effective and way more influential. What this is allowing you to do is essentially package up what you have to say in a way that people can very easily connect with, very easily take on board, and then gives them the information they need to take the next step or to have some kind of action. And this can be really, really good for writing anything from a social media post right through to a full-fledged email. And I've got some great examples, and these are real world examples I'm going to show you soon too, of how KUBA is used really well and how it's not used and the whole thing just feels horrible. So KUBA stands for K, which is the know, U, which is understand, B, which is believe, and A, which is action. And they all come about with a series of words that can be written down or conversation points that can be used that help someone to know what they need to know. First of all, what is the information that needs to be known in this piece of communication? The second is, what does that person at the other end need to understand about what your information is? So this is where you're going beyond right, this, you need to know this. Now you need to have a deeper understanding of this as well. Thirdly, we're asking people to believe in something, and often that's believing in their ability to do it. And I'll have a bit of an example of that in a second. And finally, what the action is that they need to take. So if I go back to the beginning, what do they need to know? What do they need to understand about what you just communicated they need to know? How they can believe that they can actually carry this out, and then the action that you need them to take. So that all sounds really nice, and it reduces the chance of misinterpretation, which was ultimately what we're trying to do. But how do we apply that in the real world? Because it all sounds like a great university theory, but how do we make it work? So let's look at the example of KFC in Alice Springs at the moment. So they have had a lovely photo of this that someone took and sent up to me. I should have actually just posted it on here, saying that we are currently out of chicken pieces. This is due to supply lines being cut off by flooding between Adelaide and Alice Springs. We will be back to our regular menu once the supply lines open again, which the Bureau of Meteorology and NT Roads indicates maybe at least another week. For now, you can enjoy our burgers, tenders, chips, and extras. This is the perfect KUBA, and this is a sign of a company that really believes in clear communication to customers. So the KUBA starts with, what do they need to know? What they need to know is that we are currently out of chicken pieces. What they need to understand is this is because of the supply lines being cut off due to flooding. What they need to believe in is this idea from the Bureau and NT Roads that it may be about another week. So they can look at that and go, oh yeah, I can hang on for that long. It's about another week. We get it. It's all like that. Or they can believe the story. So you're not just saying basically that, yeah, it's cut off, but here's a bit of more about when we think this might be solved. And then the action is then they can either choose to walk out because they want chicken pieces, or they can go, you know what, I'm just going to have a burger this time, or some tenders, or some chips, or some a coleslaw, or a chocolate mousse or something. I love KFC's chocolate mousse actually. But with all that, it's giving you the perfect KUBO. The first paragraph, K, no. The second one is understanding of why they're out of chicken pieces. That's the U. The B is the belief, which is looking at about a week. And then the A, the action to take next, is very clear. Now I'm going to make that the opposite when we go to Chemist Warehouse. This is a Chemist Warehouse, and the sign that was, I didn't take a photo of this one, but I remembered it so well. Inside a Queensland Chemist Warehouse, while rapid antigen tests were really, really, really rare, starting to become a little easier to get now. Please stop asking for rapid antigen tests. We don't have any, don't know when we'll have any, and don't know who else has them, exclamation mark. Whoa, aggressive. They've obviously, someone's been having a bad day with that one, or they just decided that, oh, maybe they have just decided they're not really going to go too well with this. They think that there's, they're just sick of hearing the questions probably. That's probably where it came from. But instead of, going down the route of KUBO, of saying, here's something you need to know, which is we are out of rapid antigen tests. Here's something you need to understand is due to supply lines and uncertainty of when we get our next stock, we don't actually know when we're going to have some more. Then the belief is that going into we actually don't know exactly when they're going to be in, and we don't have any information about who else has them. But here's an action you can take. And the action could be, we suggest you call around some other pharmacies and ask if they've got any in stock. And that would have been perfect. It would have been a perfect Kubo communication where that would have been put across really well. Instead of, please stop asking for rapid antigen tests. And they had these all around the store. It was so aggressive and so nasty that it just makes you go, you know what, if I wasn't a regular Chemist Warehouse shopper, I wouldn't return to you. And it sort of soils the experience you have of all Chemist Warehouse stores, even though this is just one franchise holder, not everybody, it wasn't the whole chain, but it does make you feel a little bit, okay, I don't feel so great going into that chemist when they're so aggressive and so nasty. All I want is to get a wrap because, you know, I've been told I have to, and I don't expect to be approached in that kind of way. So two very different ways of communicating. But this is also, you know, really shows up big online, because online, we don't quite have the time or the space to be able to lay everything out in a beautiful story or to tell it in such a way that's really easy for people to understand. Online communication isn't designed for that. It's designed for quick, short, sharp exchanges that have one goal: to get probably one piece of information across really easily. For Chemist Warehouse, that information was, we're out of rapid tests. For KFC, it's, we're out of chicken pieces. That's the singular things they wanted to get across. Now, KFC were able to do that on a quick, short, sharp post that was able to be read very easily at the front of the store, and on their social media posts. They use the same wording for both. But for Chemist Warehouse, well, it wasn't quite that simple. They decided to go for a very short, sharp thing because maybe someone was sick of being asked and had lots of aggressive response in there. So some of the most common forms of your communication are going to be email, your Facebook comments. That's also a place where you get lots of interesting communication, and also through things like reviews and recommendations of your business. That throat's starting to get really, really tired now. So you'll hear them in my voice. The more ideas expressed in email, the less chance that they'll be understood the way you really wanted them to be. So that's the danger of email, is that we can tend to get really wordy, and we can tend to get really talkative and over-explain things and try to justify our position and get quite defensive when someone sent us something. But the idea is that the more things we try, the more topics and more things we try to express in an email, the less chance that any of them are going to be understood. So they'll read one point and one sort of idea and take that in. And then the rest of it's like, oh my God, this is just getting overwhelming. It's like 7 points of different information here. How am I meant to remember all this? So what happens is that they walk away with very little understanding of anything that went on there. They've just kind of skimmed, because that's the way people read emails these days. We're not reading it like a novel. We're not reading it like the Bible or the Quran. What we're doing is we're picking it up and saying, you know what, I'm just going to skim over this just to get the information I need and go. And what happens when it's too wordy, we don't pick up that information at all. In something like a Facebook message or a Facebook post or a Facebook comment, the more complex your idea is that you want to communicate, the greater the chance it's going to be misread. So when you're on social media, that is not a place to be discussing great length. And this is why Facebook has in the past been such a bad place for things about religion and tolerance and politics and different views about the way the world is and the way we should raise kids and all that sort of thing, right down to, you know, the behavior of Grace Tame at Australia Day yesterday. All that becomes is full of very complex reasons. And what we try to do as humans, we try to take complex ideas and break them down to simple solutions or simple responses or simple reasons. So we say, oh, it's Grace Tame, she was discussing because she needs to learn manners. So a very complex issue about sexual assault and a very complex issue about the way that the Prime Minister has interacted about sexual assault and all that has been reduced to someone now having bad manners, when really what it's all about is much more complex details between a Prime Minister who has certain views of life and a woman who has another view of life, kind of clashing there. And that's reducing it down to jingoism, which is like just, you know, oh, she should do this, or he should do that, or he just needs to change. Those kind of simple solutions are what we look for on Facebook. That's why it's so easy to have an argument on Facebook, because no one's there to discuss or be convinced about everything. We come to Facebook with our own way of thinking. We come to Instagram with our own way of operating in the world. We're not there to be educated on something new. So when you try to do that, when you try to explain something very complex or complicated to someone, you lose them very quick, because they're not there for that. They're there for a quick fix. Easy problems, easy solutions. Entertain me, make me laugh, give me a bit of outrage, but nothing that's going to be so explaining that, you know, there's complex reasons behind the way people do what they do and the way they write. So if you're trying to write a post for Facebook and you're trying to do this in such a way that you're trying to explain quite a lot of stuff over a long post, you've lost them usually after the second sentence. The rest of it's just bleh. I know that sometimes they say to you when you're trying to sell things like online courses or digital products that you need to explain all the solutions and the problems. What you need to do is get their attention. That's all Facebook's good for, getting attention, so they'll go and read the information elsewhere if they're interested in it. But they're not going to read it online. They're not going to read it on Facebook. They're going to take that offline to another place, to a website, to a landing page, and learn it that way. Because if you try to overcomplicate it, you try to write something too long on Facebook, we've got no real attention span on Facebook. Attention span is about 3 seconds. So we don't get it in 3 seconds, we're not going to get it at all. And then when it comes then beyond that, and we go into something like reviews and recommendations, which can be quite pointed, we've got to understand that reviews really exist in the extremes of I had a good experience or the extremes of I had a bad experience. The in-between is kind of like no one really goes there. That's why most reviews are either 1 or 5 stars. They're either completely happy or completely disgusted. So this is where you need to then look at the reality that a review or recommendation is usually very short and focuses on the one thing that either it really impressed someone or the one thing that really annoyed them. Now there might be, if they're really they've got a lot of time in their hands, and we probably look at baby boomers like that. They're generally retired and they've got a bit more time in their hands to be doing these things. I've seen my dad do it. You might get a long list of gripes that are put on there, but they never really get into the long list of things that went right. They just look at all the gripes. So understand that there's a context of these things, that when you're writing them, it's best expressed when you just have one thing that really annoyed or impressed you, and then feed that back to people. It's more useful for other people. But as someone who's being reviewed or someone who's having a recommendation or not recommendation written about you, it's a little bit different. It's then you understanding what the nature of that communication is. It's not a place to make you feel good. It's a place for consumers and customers to feed back to you their experiences. And those experiences usually are bad. Sometimes they're good if they're friends. They'll write nice things about you. So it's definitely the digital communication side of that. It's a little bit easier to sort of take in. So what we've done over the history of the internet to make online communication a little easier and to express emotions, we've invented things like emoticons, what I call leet speak, and I'll explain what that is in a second, and emojis. Emojis are really obvious. We're all very used to those. So when in the early internet, emoticons were a way of expressing something you couldn't necessarily express verbally. We didn't have voice calls. We had phone calls naturally, but we're chatting to people on online bulletin boards. We weren't even on the World Wide Web yet. There was no Facebook or anything like that. There wasn't even at that time when I started using the internet, there wasn't even images. It was all just text. And so what we would do is we'd take certain punctuation marks and combine them with letters or combine with other punctuation marks to form emotions. And you can see that the smile, I still use that because it shows my age. Things like the big smile, I'll use the shout or the yawn. What else do I use? Oh yeah, sticking out the tongue, I'll do that one quite a lot. I'll also look at, not the coffee cup, never done that one before, but I can see what it is. Probably the cry, I've done that one. There's several in there I still do to this very day, that I express emotion or lightness to my words, especially the smile happy one. That one I'll do quite a lot. That then moved into what we call leet speak. And it's about the same time. Leet speak is short for elite speak. So the elite internet people who, we were the leading edge of, sophistication and new technology, because we knew how to use IRC chats and bulletin boards to communicate with people we'd never met before or likely never will meet. And so it was called elite speak or leet speak. And that was using acronyms like TTFN, which is like ta-ta for now, TTYA, talk to you later, long time no type, away from keyboard, back at keyboard. All those kind of things are helping us to go to shorten it down and add a little bit of some softness to words, I guess, because words laughing out loud are lots of types. So you go LOL. But then at the same time, telling someone you'll be right back, BRB was like a light, sort of casual and kind of nice way of saying you'll be back. You won't just, I'll be back later, can sound a bit, a bit direct and a bit blunt. But having BRB, it lightened a little bit. So made it feel like it was a bit more friendly. Now, as we moved on out of leet speak and emoticons, we developed things called emojis. And now emojis, which came out of Japan originally, emojis are a different way of communicating expression in a much more graphical way, kind of like the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt, where things that what you would write is the letters or the words that were used were actually used in a way that what you drew represented what you were talking about. So a house was a house, a bird was a bird, etc., etc. So in emojis, we've then got a whole set of emotions that we can share with people that are very, very clear and universal across lots and almost all different cultures. So we've got, the devil being, I'm being cheeky, the sunglasses on the smiley meaning I'm being cool, the love hearts in the eyes meaning that I'm in love with what you just said, or something like that. It's much more closely. And then you've got gestures using fingers and hands, and then you've got things that like aliens, I'm not sure what they are for, but they all used in a way that's helping us to communicate more clearly. So it's not just text anymore. We can break it up with a little bit of jovialness, a little bit of joy, a little bit of nice and soft, and allows us to get that message across, which sometimes might seem quite blunt and quite sharp, to soften those edges down a little bit. So we can help people to feel a bit more comfortable with the way we're talking. So with a smiley after something we've said, which might actually, if read without a smiley, seem very, very blunt and quite aggressive, with a smiley, it puts context around that sentence to make it feel a lot better. I like emojis. I don't like emojis when they're overused. An emoji at the end of a sentence to indicate like what I just read should be taken with a grain of salt, or what I just read is like, wow, that's really important, or what I just read actually makes me angry because of the emoji that was used, then I've actually receiving the information better and more precisely and more accurately than what I would be if that, for instance, that person hadn't have actually shared that emoji in there. Because when they don't share an emoji, you're kind of still guessing stuff. You're kind of still trying to work out what it is you're doing. You're trying to still work out how I'm supposed to be receiving this message. So then we get a bit stuck in, well, maybe this is not really quite the message that was meant to be put across. And then we get conflict coming about from it. Things like this, you suck, LOL. You suck, LOL feels a lot more friendly than you suck. You're hopeless with a laughy thing is a lot more friendly than just saying you're hopeless, which you might mean, actually, I am hopeless. The other one might be, oh goodness, this situation in which you just told me about, yeah, you're kind of hopeless in that laugh. And then tomorrow will be okay. Which without an emoji might see tomorrow will be okay. Oh, good. I'm good to know that tomorrow will be okay. But in this, it could be the getting a report through to your boss, and they include an angry emoji saying, basically tomorrow will be okay, but I'm not happy about it. And then adding an emoticon such as, yeah, nah, mate, with a wink on it is like, yeah, no, I'm not going to take that on, but I understand where your cheekiness is coming from with asking me for this particular thing. So just adding that and softening things, I think it's actually a useful way of talking. English literature people will hate me for saying this, but I think emojis have really helped us to solve that problem of how to communicate with people in probably a more casual way, without having to get the words so right all the time. For those who are from a non-English speaking background or have English as a second language, this can really help break down the barriers and help someone to communicate the way they really wanted to communicate. So now I'll move on to the obligations of the sender and the receiver. That sounds very formal, doesn't it? The idea that you have an obligation as a sender or a receiver of an email. This is going to be fun to go and work out. Where are you going with this one, Dante? A really good definition I saw of communication and its effectiveness is this one. Effective communication is all about conveying your messages to other people clearly and unambiguously. That's a big word. It's basically getting your information across to people so that It's very hard to misunderstand it. It's very clear what the answer, what you're trying to put across and what the actions are. And there's no sort of guesswork you have to make in there. Now, this is something which I guess our governments have been very, very bad at when it comes to COVID-19. They've been particularly confusing. There's a lot of ambiguous information in there, which is like, okay, you cannot come across the border if you've got COVID. Okay, great. I get that. But then there's exceptions to these people. You're like, wait, what? You just said you can't come across. And now you're saying that there's some exceptions. So if it's safe for those exceptions to come across, why isn't it safe for me to come across? And people get up in arms over things, and you can see what they do. It's not clear and it's ambiguous. So let's look at that. Clear answers and communication often involve the words yes and no. As a response, saying to someone yes or no. So for instance, I had friends who asked me out to a big Australia Day party yesterday. I responded, no, I won't be coming. I wasn't having to create a story around that. I didn't have to further explain it. I just very simply said no. Now, they're used to me saying that. And so some people might think that's like, oh, that's rude. I won't invite you again. That's fine. I'm not a party guy. But what it was just that I didn't want to have to feel like I was justifying it. And in your case, when you stop justifying your yes and your no, and this is in personal life as well as your professional life and your business, then you'll find that it's a world opens up to you, that when your yes is yes and your no is no, your no is not like a no because, you know, the kids are mucking up and I'm feeling a bit under the weather right now and I've got to do my hair and my husband's really wants me to be home. Or when you start explaining all that, no one actually asked for that information. All they asked for was your yes or your no. And if you give them more information than that, it muddies things up. It makes things not clear. So that they're like, oh, so you're saying you wanted to come and your husband won't let you. We need to have a talk, sister. That sort of thing. It just takes your no and turns it into a drama. So the more information you add in, the more drama you're going to create. Saying to someone that you're going to be there tomorrow at 3:45 is clear. I'll be there tomorrow at 3:45. You might even go, I'll be there tomorrow at 3:45 p.m. at the post office. Just so it's very, very clear where you'll be, that it's tomorrow, and what time it's going to be as well. So that kind of communication, where it's I'll be there tomorrow at 3:45, tells someone that they can expect you to be there at 3:45 p.m. tomorrow. That's clear communication. Clear communication is also saying, I just had a cough again, sorry. I'll be the guy in the yellow shirt with the red stripe. That's clear. They know to now look at someone with a yellow shirt with a red stripe on it. That's going to be very uncommon because most people wear black, blue, and white. So a red shirt, a yellow shirt with a red stripe will be easy to spot. Very clear, very easy to remember. Also saying something like the house with number 39 on the letterbox. That's really simple. You're just looking at letterboxes, there's 39, that's where we're going. Having someone trying to send you an email and have a submission in by 5 p.m. today by saying, excuse me, this is required by 5 p.m. today. After that time, no further submissions will be accepted. That is abundantly clear that it's required by 5 p.m. today. And after that time, that no more will be accepted. That's been laying down the law. Very, very clear. Being ambiguous. So you want to be unambiguous, but being ambiguous means instead of yes or no, you say maybe. Instead of saying I'm going to be there at 3:45, you're saying I'll be there tomorrow between 3 and 4 p.m. Oh, that's so annoying. I'm looking for, that yellowish shirt with a bit of a design on it. Well, that doesn't make it clear. It makes it ambiguous because it could be 30 people with yellowish shirts with designs on them. Being there tomorrow between 3 and 4, it's a whole hour's difference. That's not fair to someone who's waiting for your time. Being ambiguous is saying, oh, it's the house at the end of the street. Now, I tell you, most streets don't have one house at the end of them. They usually have a cul-de-sac where there's like multiple different houses. There could be a house on each side. It could be a house in a cul-de-sac in a circle. Saying it's the house at the end of the street means it could be any of the houses at the end of the street. That's what's ambiguous. That's what makes it very ambiguous. You want to make it unambiguous and clear. Saying that it's required by 5 p.m. next Friday, after that, a valid reason will be required. It's basically contradicting yourself. You're saying it's required by 5 p.m. next Friday, but you give everyone an out. You're saying, oh, but if you don't get it in by then, a valid reason will be required. But you're not actually telling anyone what the valid reason is. You're just saying there is a valid reason that's out there, but we don't know what it is. That's ambiguous. It means people can fill it in with their own meanings. Because it's not clear, people add lots of other meaning into it. And they go, oh, it must be okay. Or if I'm sick, then that's okay. Or if my mum tells me I'm grounded, then that must be okay as well. Or it just means if I'm tired and don't feel like doing it, then that's okay as well. That's a valid reason. People fill in their valid reasons for you if you don't make it clear what those reasons are. But then on the other side, it's also about receiving information from others that they're sending to you with as little distortion as possible. I'll read that again. It's all about you receiving information that others are sending to you with as little distortion as possible. What do we mean by distortion? That means without adding meaning to something. So for instance, the receiver gets an email that says, your loan application has been declined, or your membership application has been accepted, or roadworks will occur in your street from 6 a.m. Very, very clear. Your loan application has been knocked back. Your membership application has been successful. Roadworks are going to start in your street from 6 a.m. There's no meaning on that. It's just the facts. Loan declined, membership accepted, roadworks 6 a.m. There's no real need to put meaning around that. But we as human beings, quite often, we get these digital communications through our Facebook messages, through our email, all that, and we start to add in sprinkles of meaning. We sprinkle on our little context and meaning about it. A little bit of fairy dust over here and a little bit of rainbow over there. And suddenly your loan application has been declined turns into, because the assessor didn't like me and I'm a loser, I'm going to have to leave them a terrible review. Your membership application goes from being accepted to, because Jason put in a good word for me, I suppose I'm going to have to owe him big time now. Roadworks will occur in your street from 6 a.m. because this always happens in our street. The mayor hates us and wants to cause us misery. It's like none of that stuff was in that email or in that message. The email message or the social media message was all what was in the right writing. What we do as humans, we tend to add meaning to it because we receive it and we assume that because it's a simple message, there must be lots more behind that. There must be motivations and there must be all these big magical reasons in the sky about why we are receiving this communication. So when we take that meaning out, it makes life so much more simple. It makes our reception of information so much more simple. And as a business owner, it takes away so much stress. The stress of constantly having to feel like we're fighting with people in comments, we're defending ourselves from reviews, that we're constantly trying to deal with suppliers who are sending us information that isn't right. There is a way and there is a way not to reply to these things. And the first thing you've got to learn is to take the meaning out. What the things that you're assuming someone's meaning are 80% of the time not there. It's just you filling in a gap because you don't have more information. And the information you're putting in, remember where we looked at before with the Cuba, we're looking at that you, without having all that body language that you can read and all that context that you can read around a message, you then start adding in your state of mind. So if you're in a bad mood, all these things will be added on. If you're in a good mood, you might be a little bit too over optimistic. You're adding meaning onto it. Read things at face value. See things as they are, the way they're written. If the words are clear, then you can walk away with going, yes, my loan application has been declined. Move on next, rather than dwelling over it. And this is what so many of us do. Now, this is a view at the receiver. We've already had the responsibility for the sender, which is to be very, very clear and unambiguous. But as a receiver of communications, you will save yourself so much time and effort and so much stress if you stop adding meaning into everything and just accept that the words are the words. That's all they are, particularly when it's from things like banks and insurance companies and all that. They do not have the time to be infusing every word with meaning that you think they are. They're just stating the facts. So when you receive emails like that, when you receive a bit of bad feedback about your business or some service that someone didn't get so great from you, understand that the words on the page are exactly what the person was saying. There may be more emotions behind it, but you don't know that until you talk to them. So how do we then send messages to other people that are better received? What are some of the techniques we can use? I like the you did, I feel. This is a bit of a dichotomy. That's a terrible word to use, so I'll just say it's a bit of an or. You did or I feel. So the difference is between saying, David, you left the lights on again last night. Are you deliberately trying to run up a massive bill this month? Notice how there's a lot of meaning being added to that. A lot of extra information that wasn't really part of it. When the fact is that David left the lights on last night. So, hi, David. I feel like I might not have been clear about how important it is to turn the lights off each night. Which one do you think is the better one that's going to be received by someone? As a sender, Having that one there saying, instead of accusing someone and then adding extra meaning, saying you're deliberately trying to run up a massive bill, you're approaching them and saying, you know, David, I feel like I might not have been clear enough about how important it is to turn the lights off each night. And then you can explain that our power bills are rather high because we have to have aircon all day. So every little bit that we can do can help make that a little bit easier on us as a business, and also gives us more to be able to invest back into the business and back into you as well. So I'll just express again, it's absolutely vital that you turn the lights off at night. Much nicer than just going in for the swing, going in the wrecking ball of accusation and meanings and stress and horror. It makes it so much easier for people to communicate with each other if we stop trying to attack each other in that. Another one is problem solution. When you come into a conversation or some sort of communication just with a problem and no solution. So this one's between a business owner and their supplier. This week, only half of my order was delivered. This is the 5th time this has occurred. As opposed to, given this is the 5th time that incomplete order has been delivered, I'd like to organise a time to work together to see how we can all resolve this. One is just cutting straight into the accusation. The other one's saying, look, here's the facts. Let's find a solution for it, which is ideally going to have a much better relationship between you and the supplier than what it would be if you just go in yelling at them. And this is why sometimes when you go in very aggressively at people, they stop communicating with you. They stop talking to you simply because it's so painful and so annoying and so horrible to be able to talk to you that they just go, you know what, I'm just going to not talk to you at all, because it's just easier not to. It's easier to avoid you. And another one, the one idea at a time principle. So it can start off with, there are 12 different things that are occurring right now, all urgent and all laid out below for your immediate attention. So if I got that in an email, I'll be like, oh, here we go. I can read 12 different things. Holy crap, it's going to be hard. But if I read it this way, since I've got a bit of a wish list, let's perhaps work on one thing at a time so it doesn't get confusing. The most urgent issue really is the incident between Carl and Jackson. So you're saying, look, there is a lineup there. Let's just put that aside for now and let's concentrate on the most important thing right now. That whole idea that your communication, your message, your comment, your email, any of that, text message if it is, narrows it down to one thing at a time. So you're not overwhelming someone else with too much stuff they have to consider. If there's 12 different things, take the number out because they'll just focus on the number. You say, look, there's a bit of a wish list, but let's just work on one thing at a time so we can get it all right and not be confused. And the most urgent issue is this particular one. So that way you've narrowed it down to solving one problem at a time. Even though you need all problems solved, they're all urgent, you get one thing done, then you move on to the next once you've got that first thing done. Otherwise, you just overwhelm people and they'll just back off from you and they won't want to solve it at all. The facts and feelings separation. Separating the facts from the feelings is one of the great skills of life that you're going to love when you get a hold of it. I'm thoroughly disappointed with the way you handled this situation. I feel like all my time and training with you has been wasted and you're just ignoring the rules. As opposed to, there have been 2 incidents this week surrounding your quality of work that we need to work together to address. One of them is just going in and just slamming someone so that immediately before they even met you in person, they're already on the back foot. The other way is saying, look, I'm making you aware that I'm aware of this and I've seen these incidents and I know they're there, but I want to solve this with you. I don't want to accuse you of anything. I just want to resolve this because I'm a business owner and I'm just trying to make this thing work right. So how do we learn better to receive online messages? I use the reverse Cuba. The reverse Cuba is asking yourself, what do I need to know that's in this message? Read it, see what it is. What's the information that's vital for you to know, the facts? Secondly, the you, what are they trying to make me understand? Is there something in there they're trying to help you to understand? Is it understanding that not only is it important to turn off the lights, but that electricity is expensive? You see the subtext in there they're trying to help you understand. Next up, the B. Are you asked to believe something? So the belief could be that electricity is expensive. The belief could be that the KFC will be back on the road in about a week's time. Ask yourself if you're trying to believe something, and then ask if you've actually been given an action to take here. If it is, can you please respond to this email and let me know how you feel? Or if it's, can you please buy a burger instead of trying to buy chicken pieces this week? Is there an action you've been asked to take? So it's just taking the Cuba principle and flipping it on its head and reversing it as you, as the receiver. So some takeaways. Digital communication is more difficult than in person, infinitely more so. Being clear and unambiguous is absolutely vital to being able to communicate clearly and then also being able to receive communication back clearly. Choose the appropriate way to communicate. Critical stuff, do it in person or at least on a video call. If it's not so critical, then you can use emails and texts and Facebook Messenger and all that sort of thing, and WhatsApp. Both the sender and the receiver have responsibilities in this. So you as a sender of the email have a responsibility to be as clear and as unambiguous as possible. And as a receiver of it, what you've got to do is read the words as they are, not by trying to add lots of extra meaning from your own experience or from your own insecurities on there. That can be hard to do because we're not all perfectly evolved. And sometimes even I fall back on bad habits too. But in 99% of the time, I just read the words that are there and go, okay, what do I need to do? I need to work out what I need to know, what I need to understand about that, whether I'm asked to believe something, and what the action is I need to take away from this. When you put it down to that, it makes it easier. Now, if you need to learn more about how to use this sort of stuff with a guide, how to write better, how to receive things better, you can do that through the Digital Solutions Program. For your $44, you have 3 hours of one-to-one advisory with people just like me and dozens of other advisors across Australia, in Queensland, Northern Territory and Western Australia. Plus you get lots of access to all our workshops and all our webinars, not just 4 hours, but unlimited. You can use as much as you like. Register at businessstation.com.au. If you'd like to know more about the programs, please do reach out to me via social media. LinkedIn's probably the best place to get hold of me. I'm very active on there, but you can email me as well, Dante at businessstation.com.au, and I won't be judging your email style, okay? Thank you so much for spending an hour with me today. I really appreciate that you're taking this time out of your business to work on your business. And I really do hope that, you'll see some value in these videos, and I'll see you in the next one of them. Thank you and good afternoon.